This week on Monday Mindshare, we're going to discuss a couple of results over the past weekend, along with some Zone 2 training and some strategies to get the most out of your training. Hey there, Coach Aaron here, host of SFuels Monday Mindshare, where we combine endurance and nutrition to help you go longer. And on the other side of the screen, you're going to see another familiar face. We have Leighton back with us. Today, we're going to be talking about a little bit of Zone 2 training and also talk about a little bit of Superleague results this past week.
Yeah, that's right. How you doing, buddy? Good to see you, and happy long weekend for starters. Looks like you got a bit of sun in yourself.
A little bit. I was able to get out on the bike and also had attendance for one of my athletes' events, so I was spending a little bit of time outside, I guess.
Great. How'd she go? Good result?
She actually, high school sophomore here in the States, she finished first in her cross-country meet, so she won overall, so we're having a little bit of success with her.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Well, yeah, it was a big success on the weekend too, obviously over in London. Superleague Triathlon. It's an unreal, format. This kind of multi-heat, high-intensity, almost criterion-like bike ride. Yeah, it was touch and go between the athletes, but Hayden come through and had a, awesome run at the end. I don't know if you watched some of it, but they have this short shoot function, right, where they can get a break, and the Aussie Matt Hauser got a break, but Hayden came back in the end, so it was good to see.
His form right now is real. Just amazing. So he's fun to watch, especially he's a lot of energy, and those races, like you said, it's almost like they need to find a better way to get those on a larger platform, because I just think the adrenaline that is around those particular events, I think people would tune in and it would bring a lot more eyes to the triathlon community.
Yeah, I agree. But it's awesome just this year seeing Hayden's progress in the swim. Like, I would say even last year, he would have some work to do on the bike usually in most races, where he's right there this year, and they had some close-up footage of him in the water there, and just the glide and catch of his stroke is really good right now. It's great to watch it. It's really got almost like a pool swimming stroke on him right now. It's like a competitive pool swimming. So that's great. And, I think he's really starting to get the benefits of being able to have strong finishes. And we're going to continue working with him, obviously. But, it's great to see. And he's still got quite a few races left in the season. Like, it's not like season's drawn to an end. So he's a busy boy right now.
Well, and especially when he threw in the Collins Cup, which was just a slot. It's a distance that he's familiar with in the past, but it was different than what he was really working with for most of the season. It was impressive to see how well he went in and showed up at Collins Cup as well.
Yeah, that was kind of like a bit of a left field. Anyway, he stood up, and he looked like he really used everything he had by the finish line. So it was a good test.
Absolutely.
Anyway, well, hey, everyone's kind of warming up. Like, we're 4 weeks away from Hawaii. When do you head down there?
Just a couple of weeks away. So
great.
So getting pretty excited, and it's just, at this point, it's just making sure everything from the travel and everything is really secured and ready to go, because even I've heard, what was it? Joe Skipper had some issues with lodging this past week. Right. So there's just been a lot of things going sideways for people.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it all goes well. I just know that they're kind of, coming out of COVID in the spirit of kind of rebuilding the tourist industry there, and hopefully they got the resources to make this a great year. So we'll see what happens.
If nothing else, we'll have some good competition.
Oh yeah, that won't be the problem. Hey, so we want to chat about Zone 2.
Absolutely. We're getting into that point of the season where we're starting to flip back, at least for the Northern Hemisphere, where we're starting to flip back into Zone 2 training, really trying to develop that aerobic base. also trying to increase that fat oxidation, capillary response, all the things that kind of go along physiologically with zone 2 training. So we thought that it was a good idea to kind of just talk about a couple of aspects that's really going to help our viewers get the biggest bang for their buck.
Well, I thought we were flipping back to it too until I joined your Zwift ride the other day, and the 10 intervals didn't feel like zone 2 to me at all.
I guess it's all where you're sitting in the mix, right?
Totally. Anyway, it was good. But yeah, look, I just I would say like we've just kind of noticed a few, probably over the past 2 months, a couple of cases where, more than a couple, but cases where I feel like it's this kind of, not weird, but a situation where, you know, the bulk of your training leading into the season, of course, has been more zone 2 aerobic development. And then the racing starts and high intensity increases. And it's rightful that in the spirit of using the right, you know, fuel in the right time, that you start seeing the carbohydrate loads begin to increase. But I think what can happen is if you come off the races and you can maintain that kind of carbohydrate intake. And what we've been seeing is just a few cases where a little bit of confusion about when you get back into redeveloping or extending, if you will, your zone 2, your aerobic capacity, that you have these cases where they're blunting the kind of stimuli to improve fat oxidation by taking probably a little too much carbohydrate, either in shorter duration training sessions or sessions that are really not that high intensity. And I also think what can happen, Aaron, is in that kind of in the middle of the season period, you can find yourself kind of doing a lot of zone 3 work, which is not, I think as a lot of people would say, not that great in development.
Not effective
in
at
terms
all,
of
efficient
right.
for long-term development.
So I get the sense that there kind of is a bit of drift on zone 3 and probably, I'll just say, premature carbohydrate consumption, and that it's kind of blunting the stimulants to really optimize whether it is aerobic capacity or zone 4, zone 5, you know, more high intensity capability, VO2 max, what have you.
Well, like you said, I think in a lot of cases, our brain plays against us in certain pieces of our training work, and you come out of that race season per se, and like you said, you're implementing some carbohydrate intake due to the higher stimulant, but you come out and you forget, oh crap, I don't need this stuff. I need to go back into more of just a lower carbohydrate approach, because the goals in that particular phase of training completely flip on a different spectrum, and you're not looking to really get comfortable in an uncomfortable state, right?
Yeah, spot on. And you know, Dan just wrote this blog, right, which I thought really helped to kind of put on a page, if you will, this the science behind the construct of right fuel, right time. And he really has all the references there of, I mean, he gets down to 5 kind of summary bullet points at the end of that article. And it was interesting though, before, you know, jumping into those 5 bullet points, his PhD student, Jeff Rothschild, he kind of made this point when they did the, you know, meta-regression statistical analysis, that actually the diet that sits around the training can be more influential to your ultimate fat ox numbers than, you know, taking carbohydrate in the training. So I think this kind of gets back to the point that, you know, just raw training clearly will have a positive effect on your fat ox capability for sure. Right. But, you know, really extending that, just general everyday diet, you can't kind of have a foot in both camps where you're knocking out carbohydrate around training and then trying to do the right thing in training. You're kind of diluting what's possible. And anyway, we'll get into these kind of 5 points, because I think it's just and we'll make sure we put the link to the whole blog article, but maybe we can have a chat through those 5 points. I think the first one was just around, restricting carbs when there's just not a lot of, so like in easy aerobic, like what I'm doing right now, aerobic sessions where there's not a lot of glycolytic demand, not a lot of demand for sugar. And it's kind of obvious in reflection, but I just think the way people have been trained for so long kind of can come natural. I mean, the audience typically we're talking to get this one,
right?
But probably worth again restating, like you said, in the middle of the season, just be careful that you're not, adding carbs unnecessarily in these kind of zone 2 low intensity sessions. So, yeah,
it's kind of that carbohydrate manipulation. You want to implement them when you need them, and when you're going into zone 2 work, especially, I really recommend that carb depletion, just because it's going to step up and kick up that utilization of fat ox.
And then the flip of that is, which was the second kind of summary point that Dan called out, was just as you get into the longer sessions, I think 2 hours plus, that sure, that's when you can add carbohydrate, into the ride, not at the start, but we always say kind of starting 30 minutes to an hour in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to facilitate you kind of really making sure that you have good quality in those longer sessions, and you not have this big grade, I should say, grading off, if you will, to the latter end of the session. And it's not going to affect, really, you can if you you can test this. It's kind of not that elegant to test it, but I have been known to be out on the trails for 4 hours and doing ketone and blood glucose testing as you go through the session. But you will see that even after an hour or two, if you take some carbohydrate, at that point, it's really not going to have that much effect on fat ox, on ketogenesis. You'll still see that your ketone levels will begin to rise, which is a good proxy for you clearly oxidizing fat,
mm-hmm.
In those longer sessions. So I think that's good. And also it just kind of facilitates, particularly again in the core of a season where it's not uncommon at all to do back-to-back sessions on the same day, coming out of that first session and being kind of in a good state for your second session later that day.
Absolutely. And it's almost kind of keeping the tanks charged up with fuel to get you through that second quality session that you want to make sure is quality.
Yeah, no, I agree. Dan did highlight on the third point just around tempo sessions where you're kind of clamping the floor and the ceiling of a kind of performance session, that there's probably more to be gained adaption wise by restricting your carbs in a session like that. Also, I think the interesting one was the fourth point, which is this is where I think a lot of people can get this wrong, and it's really a function of what the real intensity of your zone 4 and zone 5 needs to be. But clearly, as you get into closer to race season, you're adding those higher intensity interval type sessions. It really does need to be in those 4 and 5 zones to really have the stimulus with respect to VO2 max or what have you, anaerobic thresholds, etc. But it's in those zones that absolutely the body's going to be looking for carbohydrate. And the last enzyme involved with really breaking down and utilizing that form of a substrate, carbohydrate, if you were to go straight keto, raw keto, that last enzyme the PDH enzyme can actually dilute and blunt. Mm-hmm. So higher intensity sessions plus some carbohydrate, maintain that enzymatic process, be efficient. Good thing to do, obviously, coming into race season.
And a little bit of, he talks about this, is the timing around that as well.
Yeah, go ahead. Why don't you talk through that?
So really it's been shown by that testing that implementing a little bit of carbohydrate, probably late meal the day before, has a greater impact in storing that glycogen and utilizing that glycogen within that higher threshold or VO2 max style workout.
Right.
And so many individuals probably pull the plug and implement carbohydrates maybe 15-30 minutes before that workout, which, if you're going to end up adding it in, it would be more best utilized about 30 minutes or 45 minutes into that session,
right.
rather than before or at the beginning of that session. Because again, you still got to warm up. You got to get into, you want to still create some physiological adaptations early on in that workout. So by implementing the carbohydrate at the right time, whether it be the evening before meal or 30 to 45 minutes within that session, you are more likely to get greater benefits and really top off what you're trying to accomplish in those hard sessions.
Right. I mean, I think he would even go as far as calling out really heading into those sessions in a somewhat fasted state. Right, to really trigger that stimulation and adaptation process. So kind of interesting when talking to Matt Kerr, just how much of his sessions he starts at least in a fasted state. And to your point, if it is higher intensity in the latter end, he will top that off to make sure it's a strong finish, if you will, to the session. So and then the fifth point that Dan just called out is, and this is a really important one, and I think it's even more important for women, and that is that you just got to be conscious and aware of your holistic overall caloric intake, particularly in those days where you are constraining the carbohydrate. You need to make sure that the calories are coming from somewhere, i.e. fat. A catabolic state is bad for anyone, but particularly in hormonal cycles with women, it can really wreak havoc. So making sure that healthy fats are being added through the day in all the different forms. I think everyone's probably well aware of what they are. Just to keep the overall caloric load up, where, training load is still pretty intense, yet your carbohydrate is pretty low.
Absolutely. And he shared some information on Chelsea, which we got to thank Chelsea for allowing some of that material to come out. And it just reiterates that it's extremely important to, even though you might be lower carbohydrate or lower carbohydrate through your training, it's super important not to neglect the other nutrients that you can get from protein and fat consumption. So it really is making sure that you still understand that you have caloric needs from a body standpoint, from an energy utilization standpoint, and those calories need to be added in, especially if you're removing or decreasing one aspect of that three-pronged approach.
Yeah, no, you're right. Spot on. Well, good. So I think that's a great paper, really succinct. There's a table at the end of it just to make it really succinct on, tempo, VO2 max, zone 2 aerobic, like what should the high level guidance be in terms of mix of fat, protein, carbohydrate. We haven't talked much about protein. Maybe we'll do that in another session, Aaron, because it plays a role. And I think there's some probably misunderstanding out there. So we'll make sure we cover up on that one in the subsequent session.
And super important, because I've been reviewing some athletes' nutrition lately, and protein has almost seemed to be very low for a high active individual, and trying to get across that does present some issues with bone breakdowns, muscle breakdowns, and other aspects. So I think that will be a good topic to bring back around and really spend some focus on the importance of adding protein in and around your session and just throughout your day.
Sounds great. Yeah, and hey, looking forward to also talk to you. We've been doing some research really on chocolate and caffeine as it relates to your circadian rhythm. So basically, sleep cycles, wake cycles. So we'll be keen to kind of talk you through that too. But great to catch up with you. Have a great what's left of it long weekend.
Absolutely. You enjoy it as well. Hopefully that run continues to go smoothly. You made me feel like a little lazy, but I will definitely be hitting my training a little bit later today.
My fault. I should have said up front we were going to be running together. All good, buddy. Good to talk to you.
Well, good to talk as always, and we will be back next week to share some quality content. But as for today, we appreciate all of you guys tuning in. Leighton, I appreciate you sharing some time and joining with us today.
Absolutely, bud. Always a pleasure. Talk soon.
You know it. And this has been Monday Mindshare, and let's go longer.